Most construction companies or construction businesses are usually founded by those who are tradesmen, right? So they don't have that kind of, brand knowledge or marketing knowledge. So they go out there, they slap some, usually it's a red, white, and blue logo on the side of a vehicle, right? It's pretty typical of construction businesses. And, and they find some clip art and stick on the side of the van. And that brand is never going to be remembered, right? Like they're going to be one of 100 in your community that just has some logo or numbers, or the worst are the ones who put the entire Clipper flyer on the side of their van. I sell this, I sell that, $99 service. That's not building a brand, right? You're not going to be remembered for that.
Would you like to ever be able to sell your construction business someday, or maybe pass it on to your kids? Would you like to scale your business, hire more employees and grow it, and be able to spend more time working on your business instead of working in it? Have you ever been frustrated because your team won't buy into a process? Well, if you answered yes to any of those questions, this podcast episode may be for you. Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com. My name is Todd Dawalt. That's spelled D-A-W-A-L-T. I'm your host. We've been around for about 10 years, and here at Construction Leading Edge, we're all about helping construction business owners have more freedom, more impact, and more wealth by systematizing your construction business. Think self-managing construction company. Here's what you're going to get from this interview with today's guest. His name is Anthony Perera. He talks about how he scaled a business from 2 people to over 1,000 employees. Anthony talks about what it means to build your brand first. You'll get some great advice on how to build yourself out of your business in case you ever want to sell it or pass it on to your kids. This is very important because what we see a lot of construction business owners who have designed their business to fail without them. So it's crucial that you build yourself out of your business. We spend a bit of time talking about how Anthony gets people to buy into a new process and the first few steps if you ever want to sell your business someday. There are some crucial things you need to do to make your business sellable. So my conversation with Anthony Perera it's basically a masterclass on entrepreneurship and scaling a company. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Anthony Perera. Enjoy. Anthony Perera, welcome to the podcast. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So I've been looking forward to this one. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff. You have a pretty interesting background. You've done some pretty interesting things. You're doing some pretty interesting stuff now that we're going to get into. But let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started in your first entrepreneurial venture? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was 19. I was going to school. I wanted to pursue a military background. Went to Citadel for a while with the intention of applying to West Point, nominated the whole 9. Long story short, didn't make it into West Point, so I left Citadel and moved back to Central Florida, where I was an extreme enthusiast in the mud racing and mud bogging world. Growing up in Central Florida, that's really all we had to do besides that and horses. And I started racing mud trucks. And one day I wanted to go to the store to pick up a magazine on how to make my mud truck faster. And there wasn't anything that really existed at the time. You really only had, Jeep and 4-wheeler and ATV and these kind of other off-road brands, but nothing that catered to us. And so I said, how hard could it be to open a magazine? I mean, it's really a pretty picture book and some words, right? And I was halfway decent in English class in high school and college. So we ended up launching Mud Life, which was our first business. I was 19 years old. And, literally had 0 advertising clients, 0 subscribers, and a few $1,000. And, was hard at it. Initially launched it selling it like a hot dog vendor at events for $3 a copy around the state of Florida and the Southeast. By the time we were in our 3rd issue, we were in 16,000 retail stores across the country. But at the end of our first year, kind of grew a real brand behind the business. And that's kind of been my core ethos of all my companies, really build the brand first. It's kind of proven successful for us. So Mud Life was our first business, ended up growing it, had a huge online retail presence, had 1 million Facebook followers back in 2000. And I think it was 8 or 9 back when that was kind of unheard of before you could buy Facebook followers. And it was like pre-advertising period. And sold the company when I was 22 to a large publishing firm called Source Interlink Media, who at the time owned Car and Driver, Surfer, Hot Rod, Diesel Power, all the big brands. was kind of my first entrepreneurial venture.
All right. I want to talk about something you mentioned. You said part of your ethos is to build the brand first. Can you expand on that, on what that means?
Yeah, listen, customers endear themselves to brands, right? Customers endear themselves to products through kind of that brand recognition, that brand awareness. You got to build the attractive character. And that goes in any kind of marketing, right? So, instead of being just another product on the shelf or another, home service company filling up a Google ad, we got to kind of build the brands. A lot of our success in marketing has really come on endearing ourselves to our communities we're involved in, whether that's through PR, community engagement, getting involved, things like donations, charitable events, to really kind of make the your community you're trying to target aware of who you are and what you stand for. And so with Mud Life, it was really, who's our community? How do we build a brand around this? How do we engage with them? How do we keep them hooked to our product? And that was really proven successful. I mean, we were selling merchandise. People got tattoos of our logos on their bodies. I mean, it was really a culture that we built around this product. And it's hard to do when you're looking at home service company, or you're looking at a bar or restaurant. But you can still use that same kind of mentality, because transparently, our next business was bars and restaurants, and couple of our customers actually got our logo tattooed on then as well. But always kind of building that brand, and that's what's been our success, right? And what leads us to success.
So we're talking to owners of construction businesses, and they're thinking, I can't imagine somebody ever tattooing my logo. Frankly, I can't imagine. Maybe there is somebody. Look, if you're a Construction Leading Edge podcast listener and you have tattooed our logo on your body somewhere, I would love to know that. We should probably talk. But for owners of construction businesses doing remodeling, custom homes, home services, what advice would you give them for building their brand and creating that attractive character? What might that look like for a company like that?
And it's really challenging, right? Because most construction companies or construction businesses are usually founded by those who are tradesmen, right? So they don't have that kind of, brand knowledge or marketing knowledge. So they go out there, they slap usually it's a red, white, and blue logo on the side of a vehicle, right? It's pretty typical of construction businesses. And they find some clip art and stick on the side of the van. And that brand is never going to be remembered, right? Like, they're going to be one of 100 in your community that just has some logo or numbers, or the worst are the ones who put the entire Clipper flyer on the side of their van. I sell this, I sell that, $99 service call. Like, that's not building a brand, right? That's not, you're not going to be remembered for that. And so, I would say spend the money in a good branding agency to get a good brand. There's a great one out there, Kick Charge Creative. We go to them a lot. Really good friends. It's not a plug of mine. I'm not trying to plug them, but they're a good buddy of ours and do a lot of our branding. Even when we acquire businesses, we rebrand it with them. The other one is really get involved in your communities, right? I'm not talking about hanging a flyer on a fence at a high school football game. I'm talking about figuring out, how you can engage with them. If there's a local charity that needs something, or a remodeling event, or a new roof, or an HVAC system, you could donate to one of these major players in that community. It really endears yourself, right? And you build that attractive character. People want someone they can trust in their home, right? When you're talking about homes, 9 times out of 10, that's your customer's most valuable asset outside their family, right? Is their home, right? And so when you walk in, you got to have that sort of reverence. And so when you look the part, right, and you can build that attractive character, you're always going to have more success. And when that happens, things like Google search, things like pay-per-click, all those LSA, GMBs, all these online, marketing channels have a lower cost, because now the customer is searching for you specifically, not just AC repair or water heater replacement near me. And that's what building a brand's about, specifically for the construction industry.
So I'll ask a selfish question. How would a construction podcast host like myself, what advice would you give for endearing the customer, creating that attractive character, and building that brand? What do you think?
Well, first, I would ask your listeners to get tattoos on their bodies. No, totally kidding.
Great place to start.
Yeah, no. I think you're doing a great job. I mean, you're really assisting, construction workers and home service businesses with knowledge, right? I mean, knowledge is power. And so you're building that, and you're becoming that resource. I think that's super helpful, because a lot of these people listening don't know this stuff. And it's not something you can go pick up a book and read about. I mean, sure, there's all kind of how-to books and construction guides and, and blue collar millionaire secret and all these different things that are out there. Tommy Mello is a great guy and all that good stuff, but none of that stuff really actually gives you the knowledge of how to do this stuff,
Yeah. Yep. Good advice. I appreciate that. So let's talk about one of your other businesses. You scaled an HVAC business from a couple of people to multi-state, over 1,000 employees, the way I understand it.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that. Talk about that progression. How did you get into that business? And let's start with that. And then I want to unpack a little bit of what that journey looked like and how you managed to grow it that much. But how'd you get into that business?
Another interesting and fun story. My dad's been doing HVAC since '81. So he has the EPA card from back then. It's literally a piece of paper. It's been probably laminated a dozen times. In my previous business, he was my construction manager. And when I had sold that company, he'd come to me and asked me to help open an air conditioning business. And I didn't know the first thing about air conditioning, but, having gone through 2 successful exits at that point, 3, I think, and all kind of using that same build a brand mentality, I agreed to help. And initially it was to get him off my payroll. Funny enough, right? Because I wanted to get him something to do, but it became a passion. And so we started Air Pros with 1 truck in 2017 and 1 technician. My father was that first tech. And, we started doing crazy things. We put the same mentality of building the brand into our first truck wrap. I mean, we wrapped our truck I think it was like a zebra or something crazy. Zero relevance whatsoever to what we were doing. But I wanted a way to stand out amongst the clutter of all the other, brands out there. And so started growing organically, right? Really focusing in on delivering 5-star customer service, really building our processes and our systems out that allowed us to deliver that customer service to both our internal and our external customers. So as we scaled, we brought the internal customers in as well. We want to kind of have, this 5-star service going both directions, both internal and external. And so as we started scaling and growing and really kind of building our brand, we focused on delivering the 5-star, promise. And we really believed in that. And our customers are our business. And so we use that kind of focus to drive growth. And we grew the business organically for the first few years, with aggressive marketing strategies, with hiring great people, retaining great people, putting systems in place to run the business, and then started doing strategic M&A. So we didn't have a whole bunch of money at the time. So we bought things like customer lists and phone numbers and broken businesses that were going out of business. And then, eventually went to the market, like a lot of us who listen to you, eventually want to do, to find a buyer. Had a broker, ran a dual process, right? So we ran a equity and debt process, and we chose to raise the debt because we had a bunch of targets that we wanted to acquire, and that's how we grew the business to where we are today.
You mentioned systems and processes. First of all, how important are systems and processes to scaling a business?
1,000% important. I mean, that's probably the most important thing in a business. I mean, and you hear the cliche term, you want to work, on the business, not in the business. And a lot of us are guilty of, when you first launch the company, you got to kind of be in that business. But at some point, you have to get yourself out of that company and you got to work on it. And so you got to build the systems that allow you to do that and document everything. One thing I learned early on is, I thought I could teach everybody everything just by, having the knowledge in my head, but that doesn't do very well when you start going from, 10 employees, 20 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees. You can't be everywhere all the time. And so we ended up really focusing on documenting everything we did. And I think a lot of our success I'll give to the EOS method of communication and leadership, which is the entrepreneur operating system, that really helped us scale and kind of put things in place and allow us to really drive the growth that we've seen over the past few years.
What were some of the crucial processes that you documented? Using the 80-20 principle, that would say that 20% of the processes yield 80% of the results. What would you say fell into that 20% that were most important in that business?
Well, home services is unique in the sense that we're having to visit customers' homes and hundreds of homes a day and now thousands in our business. And having that customer experience and what we wanted from a customer experience and an ideal scene with our customers, I think was what we documented first, right? So what was our presentation? What was our sales process? Once we sold the system, how did we communicate to the customer the next steps of that? And so I think if you had to document anything, it'd be how you train your people, right? How you hold your people accountable, and then how you present to your customers. Those are probably the three things I really focus on from a documentation perspective early on, right? What are the steps that we want our technicians to do in the home every single time, right? And then we train that and we hold the accountability line on that. And that really allows for consistency. And when you have consistency, it's a lot easier to scale because it's repetition at that point. And once you get that kind of ironed out, the next thing is how do you track those processes? And that's where KPIs come in, right? Are we following the same steps? Are we understanding what's happening on every call? Are we executing on our process from a sales cycle perspective, from a production cycle perspective? Are we delivering 5-star every time? And once you start documenting those processes, it's a lot easier to scale and communicate those to your team members.
Let's talk about documenting processes. I think some people would think this sounds like 3-ring binders. Maybe it's in a Word doc somewhere. If we could get really granular, what did you guys use, or what do you use to document those processes? Where do they live?
Yeah. So initially, to your point, Todd, it was 3-ring binders. It was Word documents. It was writing out our processes so everybody can be held accountable to them. As we started growing the business and as we started scaling the company, and we have multiple locations, obviously passing out 3-ring binders to everybody was very inefficient. So we built a kind of an online training academy. I forget who the provider is now, but initially it was Google Sheets, and then it elevated to something else. And so now, within our HRIS system, our technicians and our employees can drag this information down and review it and circle back to it. It's because it's not just the documentation, it's the implementation and then holding the accountability line, right? And having positive coaching and reinforcement so that those things are actually happening every single time. And that's why I think a lot of us kind of fall down on. We all have these great ideas, but we can all document them, to your point, on a Word document or Google Sheet or whatever you want to use, right? And you say, okay, hey, here you go, Johnny. Here's your process I want you to follow. And you automatically expect that technician or that whoever that is to actually do that. And unfortunately, that's not how the world works, right? Like anything else, like any good football team, right? When they go to play a game, they're practicing, they're reviewing game tapes, they're reviewing all these different steps all the time, right? So when they go on game day, they're ready to execute, right? And I think that's a lot of us fail as operators is we train one time, we never hold the accountability line. We never circle back and say, okay, well, look, we're not retraining if they're out of compliance. We're not retraining if they don't do, what they're supposed to do, or we don't coach. And I think that's where, there's a lot of opportunity out there for operators to really take that piece of advice and implement it in their businesses, right? Build the accountability models, train and coach every day. I will say one of our successes is every day our technicians are meeting with their supervisors in the field, in the office, whoever it may be, and reviewing yesterday's game tape and having the conversation. How do we perform on this call? How do we do with this customer? We got a 1-star review. Our whole team talks about it, right? How do we fail that customer? How do we solve that problem?
Got it. So what I'm hearing you say is, I think a common misconception people have about documenting processes is I'm going to write it down, I'm going to go over it once with people, and then we're going to go let it collect dust somewhere, or it's going to go hide behind a screen. But what I'm hearing you say is your process should be baked into your operating system, whereby every day they're following. There's some tool that forces them to follow the process. You have a mechanism for tracking that progress, and then tracking how they did on their process, and then holding them accountable. Am I hearing you right?
100%. That is exactly right. And so that's the key. The key is, and a lot of us are, fail to do this. We document things, we write things down, and we have this brilliant idea, but we coach it one time and then we forget about it. And then it's like any good player, you only show that play one time. I'm not going to remember that play. You go to kindergarten, you learn your ABCs. They teach your ABCs for half the year. You know what I mean? Until it becomes so ingrained in your mentality that's how you operate. You know it by heart. And we have that same kind of mentality when it comes to training our people. We want them to know what our expectation is. We're bringing them on into our business to run our playbook. When you recruit a player for a team, you want them to run your playbook. Same thing.
Yeah. I interviewed a Navy SEAL who had founded a business in the construction industry. And he said something that always stuck with me. He said, amateurs train until they can get it right. Professionals train until they can't get it wrong. So Navy SEALs train until they can't get it wrong. It's a big difference between, oh, we got it right once and then can't get it wrong. And that's probably constantly training, constantly reviewing tape, constantly reviewing results, which, that sounds like a lot of work. I think a lot of entrepreneurs would just say, man, why can't I just tell people what to do? And then they just leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work that way, does it?
Doesn't work like that. The highest paid football players, baseball players, soccer players in the world, hockey players in the world, right? They get told what to do, right? But they're also practicing every day, hundreds of hours a day or a month, whatever, a week to make sure that play is always correct. To your point, the Navy SEALs world, right? They can't get it wrong. If they get it wrong, they lose a buddy, they lose a teammate, right? And so it's crucial. And if you have that mentality in your business, you're always going to be successful because you're going to hold an accountability. Listen, and it may take a lot of hiring and a lot of firing and a lot of coaching. And it's a lot of work, to your point, Todd, but that's what it takes to be successful in our industry, right? That's what separates, the $1 to $2 million shop from the $15 to $20 million shop, right? It's those processes. It's how well they track them and how well they implement them and hold them accountable to them.
Yeah. What software do you use for this, like for your HVAC business, for work orders, tracking these processes? Is it like one system that all of this lives in, or is it multiple systems?
No, for our CRM for the AC business and soon to be our roofing platform that we just launched, will be Service Titan, right? They're essentially the gold standard in the industry. They're a great platform. They're not, they're probably one of the best, right? But and they give you basic KPIs, they give you your dispatching, they give you all that kind of stuff and metrics that you want to see. But we take it one step further, right? So in our businesses, part of our EOS methodology is we identify what are the top 10 KPIs that actually can move our business, actually can move the needle for us, right? And we track to those. So all of our processes are built around those top 10 KPIs, whether it be in HVAC, where we use a turnover methodology. So in there, what's our turnover rate, right? Meaning if we go to a customer's house and it's a service call, how many times on that call that we go to, are we finding opportunity and creating a turnover, right? One of the KPIs we track. And to do that, we have what's called call-by-call management. And so call-by-call management is a technology that we use that involves the sales supervisor or whoever's in charge of that location with the technician in real time on the call. And we have certain steps they have to follow every single time. So we have that consistency we're looking for. We want the customer experience to be the same thing no matter what, no matter where in the region, where in the country you are, you're still getting that same customer experience that we know works. And so in that world, we use call-by-call management.
Perfect. How do you train, and maybe you've already explained it, maybe the question is, how do you train people at scale like that? And maybe the answer is it's baked into the process, like step by step they're doing this. But how do you train people and continue to train people at scale?
Great question. And I'll take that in two parts, if you don't mind. Part one is I find, like any good classroom environment, right? Keeping the class intimate, smaller is usually better because you have that one-on-one experience, right? With the trainee or technician, whoever it is. And then certifying them, right? To your point, don't let them leave that training program until you're 100% confident they can't get it wrong, right? Like to the Navy SEALs point of view, you train, and you don't get certified to run on your own in our business until you can't get it wrong. And when you can't get it wrong, then you go in the field and then we recertify, and we're constantly having the same conversation. We're constantly reviewing metrics. And the greatest tool we found to do that is put the metrics where everybody can see them. You can't escape accountability when you're looking at a board every day and you're seeing your name on the bottom of the list. That's the worst place you want to be, right? So it drives this culture of wanting to be better, of wanting to learn, of wanting to grow themselves. Because that's what we want. We want them to be better. We want them to grow, right? And so from a training perspective, certify, make sure before you dispatch, let them go anywhere with your company truck or your brand, whatever you do, make sure they're certified. Make sure they're certified on what you want them to do at every time they go somewhere and every step of the way. And then recertify every couple of weeks and continuously train on that, and then hold those accountability metrics where everybody can see them, right? Make it part of your company culture where you're graded on how you perform.
It sounds like what's missing from a lot of smaller businesses is the training component. I feel like a lot of small business owners, they do the training. I think they have a couple of misconceptions. One is we're going to train once, maybe we're not going to train at all. Number two is I'm going to do the training as the business owner, and then I'm going to do it once and then be frustrated by the results. But it seems like what's really missing is that training component. What do you think about that statement? Do you feel like that's a missing piece?
I do, and it's not easy, right? That's probably the hardest part of this whole equation is that continuous training. One of our core values is continuous improvement. We're always training in our business. We're always making sure that we're following our processes. We're always being graded on how well we perform to our KPIs, and that's the culture we wanted to create within our organization. And I think we do a good job at it. And to your point, most owners, and we've all been guilty of it. You're desperate for a technician, desperate for help, right? You got a lot of calls coming in, or you got whatever. You throw a guy in a truck, give him a tablet or a notepad, and say, "Hey, go run this call," and you expect them to be perfect, right? They're never going to be perfect. It's like, you're on an NFL team, you grab a guy off the field who never played football in his life and say, "Hey, here's the pad, go run a route." He's like, "What the hell? I never learned that." Even worse, you have a guy who's from a different team, right, who has their own set of processes, what they're expected to do, come into your team without being coached or trained, and they don't perform. And we're like, what happened? Well, what happened is you didn't set the expectation ahead of time.
Hey guys, Todd here. If you own a custom home building or remodeling business, let me ask you a few questions. First, how often do you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about project details, financial issues, or something else about your business, and you can't go back to sleep? Are you spending more than 10 hours a week working in the business, wearing multiple hats, putting out fires, and you feel like you can't work on your business as much as you want? Number three, do you have enough documented systems and processes, or is it all in your head? Number four, how good is your handoff of projects from the office to the field? Are you getting hammered by the just enough to start trap, doing just enough to start? And then lastly, do you feel stuck? Do you feel like you need to grow, but you're scared to, and you don't know how to do it? Maybe it feels like you need to hire, but you're afraid to make a mistake, and you're worried you can't afford to hire somebody. Well, if any of that resonates with you, you're not alone. And if you want to make your business a source of more freedom and a source of less stress, and to systematize your construction business, and our team here at Construction Leading Edge has helped over 300 builders and remodelers systematize their business, and we can help you too. The first step is to schedule a call with my team by going to constructionleadingedge.com/apply. That's constructionleadingedge.com/APPLY, or you can send a text to this number, 877-755-2410 with the word apply. That's 877-755-2410. Just text the word apply and we'll get back to you. Now, let's get back to our episode. So let's talk about this. One thing I've seen a lot is, I've seen people take the wrong approach when it comes to hiring people. The first approach is people will say, I'm going to go hire somebody who's really good, and then we're going to bring them in, and then we're going to let them help develop the systems and the processes in the playbook, basically. The other option is we're going to have a well-defined playbook, we're going to have systems and processes, and we're going to go find people and plug them in, and they're going to follow our system and process. Which of those work better, I should say?
I think what I would say on that question is both can work, right? Because if you're not an expert in that field, if you're not an expert in sales, you're not an expert in production, like I'm not an expert in everything. And as the founder of the company, I never was, right? What I pride myself on is attracting and retaining talented individuals who share the same vision I do, right? And so I've always looked outside and said, okay, well, who could I find as an individual who's got a great sales process? And do I align my core values of that business with this individual sales process, right? If you're the expert, hey, more power to you, right? Build the process yourself. And that can be done. That has been, it's done all the time. But I'll be the first to admit, I'm not an expert in everything, right? I wasn't an expert in, hell, 7 years ago or whatever it was now. I mean, I didn't know the first thing about air conditioning, right? So, I had to learn, and I hired experts around me who, listen, some made it, some have been with me ever since day one. And you just got to understand that you're going to go through a lot of people to find the ones that really understand what they're doing.
Yeah. So let's shift gears and talk about buying and selling businesses a little bit. What I've found is that a lot of construction businesses, maybe more generally small businesses, will never be sold. They are completely unsellable, and they will simply cease to exist when the owner retires or passes away. What are the keys to building a business that somebody wants to buy?
Great question. Again, multi-part answer. One is people who acquire companies don't want all of the processes and all the day-to-day operations to be with the owner, right? Because to your point, a lot of times when we buy a company, or if we bought in companies where the owner was the man, the myth, the legend, who did everything himself or her, and they wind up getting some dollars, they exit, and the business falls to the ground, right? So we look for companies, and we do acquisitions of teams, right? How deep is the bench strength of that organization? Is there a team in place that can manage a company if Bob or Betty wind up retiring? Are they tracking to growth? Are they tracking to certain metrics that drive the business? What systems are in place? So that's why it's so important, if you want to ever sell your business, to build yourself out of it, right? And make sure that company can sustain itself without you being involved. Now, one thing I hear all the time is, I'm just going to give my company to my children. They're going to take it over when I pass away. And it's like, let me tell you something, Bob and Betty, Johnny and Jill don't want your company. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10, the kids don't want the company. They want the money and the value that you've created in building this company. And a lot of times, and I'm the first one to tell us, the sellers, is, listen, the most valuable thing you guys own isn't your house. It's this business you've created, right? The value you have in these businesses aren't in the day-to-day operations and you making a salary, right? You make a living working in your company. You build wealth when you sell the businesses. And so everybody who's listening to this podcast today, focus on building the processes to build yourself out. And I know it's a tall task. It's not easy, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, effort, and energy. But you got to take every piece of your organization and figure, okay, if I'm not here today, who's going to run this piece? Or if I'm not here tomorrow, who's going to manage this piece of my business? And start building yourself out of those different operational choke points. And then once you have that done, you find a leader, find a manager or GM or vice president, whatever you want to call them, that can take that role, right? And then slowly start allowing you to let go of the vine and let that leader actually do their job. And that's what makes the companies valuable, right? Nobody wants to buy a company where you are the source of all truth. It doesn't exist.
What do you think are some of the wrong beliefs that small business owners have that make their business unsellable, basically worthless?
I think that most business owners run their companies to pay for their lifestyles, at least in the smaller size companies, right? A lot of these companies become what I call lifestyle businesses, where every single transaction of their lively expenses are baked into their P&L, right? Their wife's car, their mortgage payments, their everything they do is the company's paying for it, right? If you want to build your company to be sellable, you want to build a company where a guy like me or a company or organization like us or private equity is going to come buy it, right? Run the business like it's an actual business, right? It's not your piggy bank, right? It shouldn't be your piggy bank. Outside of the tax consequences there, it shouldn't be your piggy bank. And if you want to build something that's going to be valuable, build things that from day one, or if you got to restart it or reset expectations, rather you take a higher salary than throw personal expenses on the P&L, right? So That's one piece of it from a belief system. Two, it's kind of what I said earlier. You got to build yourself out. You got to hire leadership that can run the business, right? Because I'm not going to buy a company where I'm reliant on Bob and Betty to do everything in that company. Because I'm buying, because what do you really have? From a home service business, what do you really have, right? You have a couple of old trucks, right? You have a customer list. You have some technicians. That's really all you have. You have your brand power. You have that phone number who's how many calls you're getting a day. When that stops and you walk away, there's nothing really valuable there if you don't have a team in place. So from a belief system, right, your company is only as valuable as how well it can stand on its own two legs without you holding the reins 24/7.
Well said. Well said. So you've acquired a few businesses. You may have already answered this question, but what are the most important things someone should look at when they're considering the acquisition of a business?
First and foremost is the people, right? Do they have the right people in place? Is it a good culture fit? The worst thing you can do is buy a company that's not a good culture fit. You come in day one and you try to put a system in place or a process that isn't culturally acceptable to that business. And I've done it. I bought companies and broken them because I didn't know what I was doing back then. And it wasn't a good culture fit, right? You have to be a good culture fit, first and foremost. When you're having the questions with the team members or the seller, whoever it may be, ask those tough culture questions. What's important to them? What are their core values? Number two, what systems do they have in place to track certain metrics, right? Are they tracking towards KPIs? Do they understand what actually moves the needle in that business? Number three, for me, and probably the most important one that I think exists when buying a company is that business poised for growth, right? A lot of times, if you're trying to sell your company, don't sell it if you're in a down market. Don't sell it if you're trending down on revenue, right? Drive that growth engine and sell it when your business is moving on the upward trend. That's when you'll get the most value for your business.
You said that you've bought companies and broken them. Can you talk a little bit about that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I've had to rebuild companies a couple times. You walk into a business where you think it's a great fit, good culture, organization, and we put something in place like a performance pay model, and technicians throw their arms up, and I'm not going that, I'm not switching that, and so we've bought in the air pros business almost 16 companies in the past 2 years, maybe 17 now. And one of the things that we've really kind of fine tuned is our integration processes, right? What steps in our integration pipeline do we take and when? Because they all have a crucial inflection point, right? If we're going to change things like in a crucial integration perspective, when the first thing you do is integrate labor or you integrate a new healthcare plan system, or you're integrating your insurance change, whatever it may be, you got to make sure you time that right? You got to make sure that you have the buy-in of the people and the technicians and the employees before we start making changes. And so, it's different in our size business because we have to integrate them, right? How we build value in our company is by truly integrating these businesses we acquire. And 9 times out of 10, we're pretty successful at it. But there's been times we've walked in and, just a bad culture read, and we move too quickly on some of these integration things, and it becomes a problem for us. So we've broken them in that sense. You have to take your time to slow down and build and repair and build the trust back from the people. And so just make sure you have, if you're going to buy to integrate, you document the integration process like anything else.
You mentioned getting the technicians to buy in is crucial. What are some things you found that work for getting people to buy into a new process or a new system? How do you do that?
Well, you got to explain the why before you explain the how, right? Why are we doing this? A lot of times when you buy businesses, and if you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about, everybody becomes fearful of the unknown. That unknown, what's going to happen next, is a massive fear point for a lot of individuals. And 9 times out of 10, nothing's going to change right away, right? But if you're going to change something, you can't just walk in and say, I'm changing this today, or I'm going to change your comp structure, or I'm going to modify your health insurance plan. You have to have the conversation on why we're doing it and how it's going to benefit them, and get the buy-in from them before you actually pull the trigger on something like that. Because without the why, the how becomes an uphill battle.
Yeah, great advice. So it looks like you've launched a private equity firm recently. If that's correct, talk talk a little bit about what a private equity firm does, and then what kind of investments are you looking for?
Yeah, so recently we launched Exuma Capital Partners. It's a lower middle market private equity group focused on home services, real estate, consumer products, and manufacturing, based here in South Florida. And coming from the home service world, I love home service business. I love anything that involves the home, because it's the most cherished item we all have outside of our family. And so looking for investments in kind of that home service sector: plumbing, HVAC, mechanical, roofing, garage doors, landscaping, pest control, all that kind of stuff, and manufacturing products that kind of go to that realm. But that's really kind of the what we're looking for. Why we did it is because we see a lot of opportunity out there. We see a lot of owners who are, to your point, are aging or growing older and don't have a place to sell. And where we differ is I'm an operator, right? I'm not a white shoe private equity guy who comes in with a suit and tie from a bank and flies in with four other guys and grills you. I understand the pain points. I understand that what it's like to dispatch a call on a Saturday when you're with your family at Disney World. What it's like that when a technician calls you at midnight because they're out of a certain part on a truck and you got to go run that out to them. I've sat in every seat in these businesses, from bathroom attendant or janitor all the way up to chief executive officer, and I know what those pain points are. So when I have conversations with these sellers, I understand what they're looking to accomplish. I understand what their struggles have been to get where they are today. And so I think we add a lot of value from that perspective. And when we try to acquire these businesses, we want to pay value to those people who put in the hard work to build these amazing companies.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a tragedy how much wealth just fizzles away. I heard somebody, I was at a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and there's the old saying, fail to plan means planning to fail. But I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's failing to plan means planning to fizzle. Most people just kind of fizzle out. Their business just sort of fizzles, and they gradually decrease, and they just turn the lights off, and it just goes away. And all of that potential wealth transfer gets lost. So, and that's kind of a shame, because I on the flip side, I see a lot of people I talk to a lot of people who want to start a business. They want to be an entrepreneur. They're a wantrepreneur, and they're excited about starting a business. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there for some sort of a transfer of wealth. So those people don't lose all of their wealth. There's a tremendous amount of value there, institutional knowledge plus wealth that can be transferred. So that's very cool. If people want to find out, like, hey, I've got a home services business that might be a fit, what's the process for? What should they do before they even talk to you or somebody like yourself about potentially exiting their business?
Well, I will tell you, if you want to talk to me, I'm sure Todd can give you my email or contact information. But in a general sense, talk to a broker, right? It pains me to say that, because sometimes brokers get in the way of transactions. I know, not knocking brokers. I love a lot of brokers out there. I've worked a lot of them in my career. Talk to somebody about it. Talk to your financial advisor, talk to your broker, talk to a lawyer. If you want some recommendations or referrals, I'm happy to help, happy to be a resource, happy to provide contacts, Todd, if you want them. And just talk about your plan, right? A lot of the things that happen in life to you are because you vocalize them, right? You actually talk them into and speak them into existence. And if you start setting a goal for yourself, like, hey, I want to sell my company at this size, or I want to sell my company by this date. A lot of those things, you got to start taking action steps to actually make them come to life. You can't just think about them. You actually got to talk about them and actually put those steps in place to achieve that goal. And so that's what I would recommend. If they do want to sell and you're looking for a potential acquirer and you want to have a conversation, we can share contact and you can get in touch with us.
Yeah, we'll definitely put your website in the show notes for Exuma Capital.
Correct. Yep.
Got it. So let me ask you this question. There are people who are thinking about starting a business. Maybe people are now contemplating buying a business, when is it better to start a business from the ground up, and when is it better to look at acquiring an existing business?
Depends on who the person is. That's a very tough question, right? Because I'm a big believer in buy then build strategy, especially if you haven't been in this industry before, right? Not everybody's going to have the success that I was blessed with when starting companies and have the drive and passion. If you do, hey, more power to you. Go at it and don't be afraid to take that leap and that jump. But unless you have a knowledge base, like in my situation, my dad was in the HVAC world. He didn't have the business acumen, but he had the knowledge base and how to actually, run a service call, right? So neither path is wrong. There's a lot of great entrepreneurs and a lot of great success stories, people starting companies from zero and scaling and selling and having a great outcome. And the same amount of success stories of buying a small business and scaling from there. So there's no wrong path. I think you'd have to answer that question yourself, right? Do you have the energy and the drive to start from scratch and the knowledge base to start from scratch? Do you have good mentors around you who can give you the guidance you need to really understand how systems and processes work? If you've never been in the home services industry or construction, that's always a challenge, right? But if you're already in the trades and you understand how to run the call and you just need help with business systems and processes, there's a lot of organizations out there that can help you do that. But my recommendation would be buy then build, right? Like go buy a small company, go buy somebody, a Bob and Betty who's retiring, right? Let them stay on for 6 months to a year, show you the ropes, and then build efficiencies upon that business is what I recommend.
Yeah. Yep. I've seen people do that very successfully. It's good advice.
Yeah.
All right. A few rapid fire questions as we land this thing. These are a few questions I like to ask everybody that I interview. How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? Do you have a quote favorite failure?
Yeah. It's a great question because no one likes talking about their failures. Everyone likes having the conversations about their success stories. But I think without having anybody who's successful in life, whether it be in business, sports, entertainment, whatever it is, has failed. There's no one that's perfect, so that's what really shapes you as an individual, as an entrepreneur. How do you bounce back? And I think one of my favorite failure stories is I sold a business to a gentleman and he never paid me for it. And, and that it cost me and my family a lot of money, to the point where it almost bankrupted us. And out of that, we ignited a fire in me like never been seen. And that out of that, fire, we built one of the largest home service companies in the country. And so, no matter how big the failure may be, and if it's self-induced or not self-induced, right? Use that fuel to power your drive, right? And so I think if you ask for how I would use failures, it's to power my drive. It's to motivate me so I never have to experience that again. And so I learn from that mistake and move on from it.
Yep. Great advice. We get to choose the story we tell ourselves, right? So I think some people choose this self-defeating story. I'm a piece of shit. I don't deserve that, or I made a mistake, and they beat themselves up and they drag that failure around for years or decades. But I like your approach better. Like, okay, yep, that didn't go well. I'm never going to do that again. Let's use it as fuel. I like that. What is something that you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional or maybe even a little crazy?
What do I think is true about business? Maybe unconventional. Yeah.
Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer, man. From in a business perspective, take your shot, try something new, break out of the norm, try something different. If to your point, if it doesn't work, get up and try again. I mean, unconventional people think that you got to follow the same exact path everybody else did. That's not the case, right? Like I was one of the first guys to ever use debt to build a $200 million business, where most guys would sell their company when they got to 30, 40 million bucks and cash out and roll equity. My family and I still control the large majority of the company, right? And so it's an interesting, method of doing it, but it's definitely out of the norm. And everybody said I was crazy for doing it, but here we are today. So I think don't be afraid to buck the norm would be my piece of advice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I found. A lot of people think, well, there's a right answer, there's only one right answer, and then there's a bunch of wrong answers. But what I found is there are a bunch of right answers. There are definitely some wrong answers. And I've also found that conventional wisdom is often wrong. Have you found that to be true?
100%. And that's why, as a leader, I like to give my team members creative freedom. And when I say creative freedom, I use this analogy. Well, I use two analogies all the time in business, and I'll share them with you today, Todd. One is, I'm a creative freedom kind of leader. So if I say, hey, I want to cross this river, right? I don't care. I'll tell my guys all the time, I don't care how we get across. You can dig a tunnel, you could build a bridge, you could pole vault for all I care, as long as we effectively get across this river, right? Another one I'll leave you with is don't be a spruce goose. Howard Hughes, I'm sure you know the story, eccentric multimillionaire, was tasked with building this massive plane for the U.S. Army during World War II. And he was such a perfectionist that he waited so long and tried to make this thing so big. By the time he actually got the plane to fly, it was outdated, right? And so I tell my guys all the time, get the plane off the ground. You can always change a wheel or change a wing or change an engine, but guess what? You're already flying. Don't be a spruce goose.
That's good. I like that. 2 rapid fire questions. What is one book every entrepreneur should read?
Without a doubt, Traction. Traction by Gino Wickman. Yep. It gives you an entrepreneur operating system. It helps me scale my business, help me get communication aligned. At all of our companies, the first thing we implement is our L10 meetings to really hone in on who's accountable for what and create owners for different things that have to be done in the business. A lot of times we're all guilty of it as a business owner. We run around with like a chicken with our head cut off, trying to accomplish different tasks, and there's no real owner assigned to things. And with Traction, I mean, listen, I'm a huge believer in it. It's helped me scale multiple companies. So pick it up. Great book, super easy read. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yep, good stuff. And so you're in Fort Lauderdale, right? What's the restaurant somebody absolutely needs to visit? Maybe it's a bar or restaurant in Fort Lauderdale in your hometown that somebody needs to visit if they're ever in town.
So I'm partial to this question because I own 2 of them, right? So If you ever want a good cup of coffee, and you're in South Florida, check out Ella Coffee House. Absolutely amazing. We hand make everything in the locations. We're scaling the company. We acquired it 2 years ago. We're going to have, we just sold a franchise territory. And then if you want a good spot downtown Las Olas, check out the Palm Room. It's a local sports bar, great vibe, great drinks. Those are 2 spots I'd recommend.
Got it. Great stuff. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate this, Anthony. This has been like a masterclass in entrepreneurship and growing and scaling a business. So lots of gold nuggets in here. If people want to connect with you, follow you, get in touch with you, where are some of the best places to do that?
Listen, I live a pretty quiet life normally, so I don't like put things out on social media a lot. But I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions there. I respond pretty quickly. And that's really kind of the only place I would say go check me out at. Gotcha.
Very good, man. I really appreciate it. This has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time and being generous with your time, being generous with your experience and sharing with us today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hey, Todd here. Before you go, thanks for listening. If you get value out of this podcast, if you could leave a rating or a review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you consume this content, that would be great. And then if you are tired of waking up in the middle of the night, thinking about project details, worrying about cash flow, if you're tired of being stuck in day-to-day operations, putting out fires, if you're tired of not having enough documented processes and systems in your business, if you're tired of being hammered by the just enough to start trap and you feel stuck, if you want to grow your business and you want to know the right process to do it, if you want to have a roadmap to follow and a proven system for that, then there's a 5-step process to systematize your construction business. And the team here at Construction Leading Edge specializes in that. That's exactly what we do. And we've helped over 300 companies do just that. If you would like our help, if you'd like to talk about what that looks like, the first step is to go to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, or you can go to our website, constructionleadingedge.com, and tap the Apply Now button, or you can simply send a text with the word apply to this number, 877-755-2410. Just send a text with the word apply to 877-755-2410, and my team will get back in touch with you. Thanks for listening. See you next time.